Seven Great Demon Lords is a powerhouse of an archetype. There's no denying that. Having won North American Nationals, this theme from a side set of all things has established its competitive credentials while destroying a ton of bank accounts in the process. And for me, I was really happy to see it win. For a long time, we didn't even have all 7 of the Great Demon Lords in the game, and I spent way too much time breaking my back in trying to force the archetype before its time. But thanks to some simple design choices and a little bit of inspiration from BT13, Bandai has not only built a competitive powerhouse, they've created something that could see success for years to come. Now, when discussing the design of 7 Great Demon Lords, we need to address the elephant in the room. This deck did largely lift its DNA from BT13's Royal Knights deck. Bandai first pioneered the quote-unquote new Megazoo approach with King Drazzle and his loyal followers, using a Digitama as a way to increasingly reduce the hefty play costs of your level 6s, while removing and absorbing those level 6s to use as a resource and, keep things fair. You have a delay option card that lets you manipulate the resources in your breeding area and pull something that you need out in a pinch, and a big boss Digimon that functions as both spot removal and your win condition. Bandai copied the template quite closely, but thankfully they did make a few adjustments to give 7 Great Demon Lords its distinctive purple flavor. Like King Drazzle, the Gate of Deadly Sins absorbs another copy of itself from your egg deck, but unlike King Drazzle, the reduction comes strictly from the gates that are now in your sources. The gate also wipes your field, but while Drazzle straight up absorbs all your Royal Knights, and only the Knights, Gate literally deletes everything, then allows you to tuck a Demon Lord from the trash into its sources if you did in fact delete something. Your delay option, Rise of the 7 Great Demon Lords, lets you tuck a Demon Lord from hand or trash into your gate's sources. But unlike Royal Knights of the Purge, you can only use the delay effect to play something out when another Demon Lord is deleted. And then we have Ogudomon, which is this deck's equivalent of BT13 Omnimon. Unlike Omnimon, who you need to draw and play to secure victory, Ogudomon needs to be in the trash, where the gate's end of your opponent's turn effect lets you delete the gate with 7 different names in its sources to spawn said Ogudomon from the trash, and then on your turn, Ogudomon does its thing and swings for game. It's also worth noting that unlike the Royal Knights, who have to survive a turn to be absorbed by King Drazzle, some of the Demon Lords from EX6 have effects to place them as sources in the gate, specifically tucking a source whenever they would leave the battle area outside of battle. This makes their game plan quite a bit faster in comparison to the Royal Knights, allowing you to potentially tuck 2 names every turn if your big boys stick. Finally, a big distinction between the Gate and King Drazzle is that the latter has a blanket prohibition against digivolving on your turn, which severely hampers your draw power and ability to proactively answer certain threats, although you can still use aces quite effectively within King Drazzle's limitations. The Gate, on the other hand, lets you bridge from your Demon Lords into any number of level 7s to deal with the opponent's current or incoming board. The cost, however, is that you really can't use Ace Digimon alongside the Gate, since you would overflow and instantly pass turn when the Gate routinely wipes your board. But really, the thing that makes 7 Great Demon Lords and Royal Knights work so well is the fact that Bandai has started printing effects that are both when digivolving and on play for these powerful Digimon. Now, while this leaves some of the older cards in the lurch, this flexibility lets the Demon Lords and Royal Knights function both in their own decks as top ends and as powerful tools in their respective Megazoo decks. This design approach also future-proofs the decks quite a bit, ensuring that as long as Demon Lords and Royal Knights get printed with on-plays that can compete with everything else in the meta, well, you should always have a shot. Speed, at the end of the day, is the only weakness that these decks can't elegantly solve, especially the case of 7 Great Demon Lords, where you need a ton of unique names and your finisher established in the trash before you can win the game. Although, as I say that, it's worth noting that Demon Lords do have access to both rush and ways to proactively trash security, so, there might be something there. Now, if you're considering picking this deck up, I think it'd help to understand how the cards work and where the flexibility of the deck design actually lies. While it's true that this deck can always remain fresh in a sense, as long as Bandai prints new 7 Great Demon Lords with on-play effects, there are certain cards that you are required to play in order for the deck to function as intended. In terms of absolutely mandatory cards, you of course have your 4 copies of the Gate of Deadly Sins, the Digitama that enables you to play your Demon Lords on the cheap and summon Ogudomon at the end of the game. Speaking of Ogudomon, this card is mandatory at no fewer than 2 copies. 3 is probably overkill, but since you don't have a ton of outlets to deal damage quickly, you are going to need to find this and get it into the trash as soon as possible to, set up your big game-winning play. Next up, we have what I'll refer to as the engine pieces. These are the cards that directly interact with your Gate of Deadly Sins. We've got EX6 Creepymon, EX6 Beelzemon, EX6 Belphemon Rage Mode, EX6 Leviamon, and the delay option card Rise of the 7 Great Demon Lords. The effects of the first 4 cards are not super relevant to the discussion. Suffice it to say that they each provide access to removal in ways that complement their secondary colors. The important aspect to consider here is the all turns effect shared amongst them. All turns, when this Digimon would leave the battle area other than by battle, place 1 7 Great Demon Lords trait card from your trash as the bottom Digivolution card of your Gate of Deadly Sins in the breeding area. This effect works on 2 levels. First, allowing you to make progress when your opponent does have the out to your hardcast Demon Lord, ensuring that you at least get to tuck 1 source under the gate. And second, this allows you to accelerate your game plan when the opponent doesn't have an answer, since the gate's start of main phase effect will delete your Demon Lord, which allows these cards to tuck a source, and the gate's effect also tucks a source since it deleted something, potentially putting you 2 names closer to your win condition. 3 of the above cards also provide some degree of trash setup, which is necessary for getting names in there to slide under the gate later, and of course, for getting Ogudomon in the trash. Rise of the 7 Great Demon Lords is a little different. It does technically accelerate your game plan in that you can tuck a Demon Lord under the gate, and since it has the 7 Great Demon Lords trait, it can be slotted under the Gate or Ogudomon to satisfy their effects as well. But it also allows you to extend your lines of play on both turns, either putting out another body when your opponent deletes one of your Demon Lords, potentially ensuring a target for the Gate to delete afterwards, or putting a free body on board when the Gate wipes your field so you can save your cost reduction for something else. Just remember that by playing something out with its effect, you are stalling the doomsday clock, so to speak. Now, all of the above cards are critical to the mechanics of this deck, and these are the ones which will eat up the most space. You can certainly cut down on these, but you will start to notice the drop in speed, and with how fast this game is getting, you are severely weakening your viability as you cut these cards. Now, Belphemon Rage Mode and Leviamon tend to be played in smaller counts, often 1 or none, while Creepymon, Beelzemon, and the delay option are played at anywhere from 3 to 4 copies. These cards altogether will usually account for 20 to 25% of your deck, which is not much when you consider how poor this deck's draw power is. So as we get new Demon Lords, you'll really have to weigh the costs and benefits of slowing down your engine in exchange for greater flexibility and firepower. Other cards that you might choose to play typically serve as unique names for the gate, blowout cards, or both. To get the former out of the way, consider cards like EX6 Lilithmon and EX6 Barbamon. Neither have that important all turns effect to load the gate with a source, and while they do have on-play effects, they are extremely underwhelming compared to some of your engine pieces. So if played at all, they're at just 1 copy to satisfy the mechanics of the deck. Many of the X-Antibody Demon Lords fall into this category as well, since they tend not to have on plays and only offer extremely niche utility when paired with their base forms. They are also unique names, which does make them attractive in that sense as well. Leviamon X is a good example of a card that is mostly played to provide a unique name, but has enough ancillary value through its base form and signature option card to really warrant the inclusion. As for blowout cards, the only one really worth mentioning from our existing card pool is EX5 Leviamon, which essentially provides a memory-efficient board wipe and floodgate of sorts during the opponent's turn. Demon Lords in this mold will compete for space with your other cards since they provide more effective disruption to the opponent's board, while still potentially netting you a name under the gate when it wipes the field. Now, when looking at upcoming support, BT19 Beelzemon also fits the mold pretty well, since it mills 2 on play, becomes a blocker, and has an all turns effect to pop a level 5 or lower Digimon on the opponent's field when cards are milled. That combination of effects is extremely valuable, but since it shares a name with one of your engine pieces, it is competing for valuable space. Finally, I have to mention EX6 Lucemon Chaos Mode, which kind of straddles the line between engine piece and blowout card. Its effect to bottom deck a Lucemon and essentially replace itself with a level 6 Demon Lord when it would leave the field is fantastic for applying pressure, but it is extremely conditional. This card functions more as a way to buy yourself time, and because of its immense potential value, you could also kind of consider it as an engine requirement as well. In any case, fantastic card, and it's probably going to be part of the deck, or at least a mainstay, for a very long time. I think the last thing worth discussing is the moderate but dwindling space for techs and supplementary cards. The number of playable Demon Lord names is pretty compact right now, so the deck does have room to play things like Tamers, option cards, and other Digimon to shore up its matchups or patch up weaknesses, such as the deck's poor draw power. Tamers are usually the first port of call, with EX7 Shoto Kazama, BT8 Digimon Emperor, and BT13 Akihiro Kurata being the most common picks. The first two provide resources while frustrating the opponent's lines of play in some manner, while the latter is pure draw and filter, providing a particularly well-timed discard to potentially set up your Ogudomon for the game-winning play. Removal is also something that the deck craves, even though the Demon Lords almost universally provide it. This deck is looking for some very specific types of removal. Those are cards that fulfill multiple functions. Take Fighting Crush for example. This card provides trash setup, is removal when checked in security or hardcast from hand, and essentially creates a floodgate against Digimon played by effects thanks to its delay effect. This card provides such good roll compression that you need to play it at a reasonable quantity for the deck to really work. Rival's Barrage is another example of a multifaceted piece of removal, outing both big bodies and acting as a weaker version of Calling from the Darkness when milled from your deck. The other category of removal worth noting are the X-Antibody signature attacks. These cards all share a unique feature to activate their main effect when something digivolves into their named target. For example, 7th Lightning will trigger its main effect from the trash when digivolving into Leviamon X. You essentially get free removal, and you can protect yourself from decking out, since these cards typically bottom deck themselves when triggering their effects from the trash. Finally, and most importantly, these cards have the 7 Great Demon Lords trait, and therefore can fulfill the conditions for both the Gate of Deadly Sins and Ogudomon. Just remember that they have limited value when not played alongside their named target, so jamming these into your deck solely to satisfy the name requirements is probably ill-advised. Level 7 Digimon sort of fill a similar role in 7 Great Demon Lords to that of kill spells. You can kind of treat these as kill spells on legs, ones that will stick around long enough to trigger the gate's tuck effect when they get deleted. Since you can play level 6 Digimon for cheap in this deck, you obviously have a very easy bridge to level 7s, and since Bandai printed the EX6 Demon Lords with secondary colors, the pool of level 7s you have access to is quite wide. Importantly, this pool of cards can also give you access to removal that the Demon Lords themselves don't, such as Shine Greymon Ruin Mode providing DP reduction, or EX8 Aegis-Dramon allowing you to bottom deck Digimon. As with anything not bearing the 7 Great Demon Lords trait, there is a cost-benefit analysis that you have to do, since digivolving into something like Aegis-Dramon over your EX6 Leviamon will net you 1 less name at the start of your next turn, and you are taking up precious space that could be used for engine pieces or additional names. Finally, we need to talk about the device cards, which are generic option cards that function similarly to delay options. These cards provide a number of potent effects at a low cost, while also ignoring their color requirements when certain conditions are met. Cards like these fulfill an extremely important niche in 7 Great Demon Lords, being low cost but high impact actions that you can take without the costly investment of a hard cast Demon Lord or an expensive kill spell. Queen Device, for example, provides excellent roll compression in that it can remove play cost floodgates such as BT8 Sakimon, while also negating powerful one digivolving effects from troublesome cards like Magnamon X. In fact, this card can provide this utility twice, assuming you have something like a pawn device to trash it from the battle area, which activates its main effects again. Not all of the device cards are currently useful in 7 Great Demon Lords, but as new sets are released and certain names cycle out of the deck, these could all provide considerable value at some point. And I think they illustrate well what the deck needs considering the space restrictions and the limitations of its playstyle. At the end of the day, 7 Great Demon Lords is a really cool deck with a lot of room to grow and adapt. Bandai were very smart when they designed the mechanics of this deck and the Royal Knights deck previously, and their commitment to supporting this playstyle is really encouraging. I've personally been playing this on and off for the last 2 months, give or take, at locals, and I really enjoy it. The deck is not solved, which is great because I love to tinker in theory craft, and I know that I've made a long-term investment in this deck since Bandai is printing new Demon Lords with powerful on-plays, so, the big chunk of money invested into this upfront isn't going to be worthless next set, and that really means a lot to me considering how expensive life is these days. It's also a deck that really forces you to play well. I mean, you really have to pay attention to what you're doing, especially with regards to your ability to plan for the long game. But it's also not infuriating to play against in the way that a mill deck or straight up control deck would be, because the deck does allow the opponent to play and actually creates a lot of excitement around whether or not that Ogudomon Doomsday Clock will actually go off. Now, all that said, I can't necessarily recommend this deck to everyone because there is a pretty steep barrier to entry in terms of card price and accessibility. And the playstyle is so different from the conventional decks that a lot of people will probably find this too frustrating to pilot, at least at first. But hey, if you like a challenge and you're maybe only looking to play 1 or 2 decks anyways, then this is certainly not a bad investment. In fact, I would be happy to say that it's a fantastic choice to pick up and play.